Internal Revenue Service IRS tax news. Most taxpayers who request an extension to file their 2021 tax return must file by October 15th. But first, the IRS keeps on telling me paying taxes, it's for my own good. They're helping me, and I just don't understand. My lack of vision and recognition of their benevolence, it's really quite sad. To that I say, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, and I still think it's kind of your fault. But fool me on a bi-weekly basis for 30 years? We may have moved from the realm of fooling to that of brainwashing. Maybe a good brainwash is not so bad, though. It's bad enough when my armpits get stinky. If my brain gets stinky, the bad smells would come out my nose instead of going up it. I'd walk around saying, wow, what's that terrible smell coming out my nose this time? It must be that dirty, sweaty brain of mine. Don't mind me, people. I had a rough day at the office today, required a lot of thinking. Have not yet been able to get to the IRS for a good brainwashing yet. I plan on going soon. But really, why does it have to be so expensive? Maybe I can just start eating minty gum to compensate for the fact that I have a sweaty, dirty, overworked, underappreciated, and underwashed, if not completely unwashed, brain. Wow, stop complaining, just pay your taxes. Well, here we go. COVID Tax Tip 2021-152, October 14th, 2021. October 15th is the filing extension deadline. Once again, October 15th is the filing extension deadline. That is tomorrow. So if we have not yet filed our tax return and are on extension, you want to file it by tomorrow, or you could be subject to late filing penalties. Also note that if you want access to the free software, you might be able to get access through the IRS website, looking up the free filing software from there, which will often take you to third-party software providers, which may allow the free software access if your income is below a certain threshold. If you go beyond October 15th, then you might not have access to that free software anymore. So I highly recommend taking a look at that at this point in time, especially given the fact that we've had a lot of changes in the last couple of years, last few years really, with regards to the tax code. It's become a little bit more complex due to those changes and due to people's individual circumstances not being as consistent as they possibly would have been in prior years, and therefore getting the added guidance of software, especially if you can get it for free, would be great because it gives you that kind of interview process. So most taxpayers who request an extension of time to file for 2020 tax return must file tomorrow to avoid the penalty for filing late. So you might then say, well, what if I don't file tomorrow? Well, then the IRS pulls out their stick and they start tallying up the penalties with the stick there. That's the stick, the penalties that will then go up. Also, you might not have access to the free software at that point in time, would have to either pay for it or use some kind of other option for filing at that point in time too. So highly recommend looking into those options while you can. Extension filers who owe taxes should pay as much as possible to reduce interest and penalties. So note that the amount of the payments are typically due at the point in time that you file the tax return and or before when you earned the revenue. And if you're in a situation where you're saying, hey, I know I'm going to owe money, I don't have the money to pay, and therefore I just went on extension and or I'm just going to kind of ignore it or brush it off, that's a natural thing to do. However, it's not a good thing to do typically just from an income standpoint, because then again, the IRS has an incentive to keep you in the system, to keep you in compliance, and therefore they're going to hit you with penalties and interest if you don't file the tax return. So what you generally want to do at that point is, if you cannot pay because you don't have the cash flow, then you still want to file the tax return and then possibly set up an installment agreement. You'll still be subject to some penalties and interest there, but they could be substantially lower than the penalties and interest that would be there if you just kind of ignored it and let them compile up. You also have typically a little bit more leeway with regards to negotiation with the IRS if you've been in compliance with the filing requirements and so on. Those who have yet to file 2020 tax return, owe tax, and did not request an extension can generally avoid additional penalties and interest by filing the return as soon as possible and paying any taxes owed. Here are a few resources on IRS.gov, IRS.gov, the IRS website, to help last-minute filers. So if you're the procrastinators out there, last minute, today or tomorrow, you've procrastinated enough, and you're like, no, I have to take it out to the last hour. I still have a day. This is ridiculous. Why are you even talking to me right now? I still got an hour. It's enough right now. You can do it right now. It's still, you still maintain the threshold of being a procrastinator. So filing for individuals, this page includes a link for IRS Free File. There's a link to that here, which is available through October 15th. IRS e-file is easy, safe, and most accurate way to file taxes. Some Free File products are available in Spanish. So this is a place where you can find those links to the Free File software, which might not be available after October, which means it's going to cost more if you want to use software in order to file the tax return after that point. Typically, filing electronically can also help taxpayers determine their earned income tax credit, child and dependent care credit, and recovery rebate credit. These are huge credits that have been kind of fluctuating over the last few years. And again, they get kind of complicated due to those changes and so on. So it would be nice to have software to help you out with those. Paying taxes, taxpayers can pay online or by phone. If filing through tax software or a tax preparer, they can schedule a payment when filing. If taxpayers have a balance and are unable to pay it now, they should set up a payment plan. So remember, if you can't pay, you don't want to just ignore the IRS because they're not going to go away. They're going to, they'll seem like they go away because they're just going to send you a letter. That's not so bad. But the penalties and interest will pile up to some point, and then there'll be a tipping point at some point in time. So you want to be, avoiding the penalties and interest is the name of the game. So viewing account information, there's a link to that here. Individual taxpayers can go to their online account to view key information from their most recent tax return, such as their adjusted gross income, their payment history, including any estimated tax payments, and their economic impact payment accounts, which may help in preparing and filing the tax return. Notice that the IRS is getting better at using their website, kind of like businesses use it. If you use online banking, for example, you probably access your online banking. You'll have a lot of resources, a lot less resources you might have noticed on the IRS to get your prior access to things like tax returns that have been filed and so on. It looks like they are making substantial efforts in increasing that, in part due to the fact that these stimulus payments they want to send out often happen to be these prepayments, and they're going to have an impact on the following tax returns. So you may want to sign into your IRS account so that you can get access to these types of things that may be necessary shortly to basically file your tax returns, including, did you get these stimulus payments? Did you get the child tax credit? There's going to be a prepayment for it on next year's tax return, and so on and so forth. Have you made your payments? How much have you paid? And this and that. So they can also view the amount they owe, their payment plan details and options, digital copies of certain notices, their address on file, and authorization requests for tax presentations. So these things are going to be useful items as well. Also, just note that you can basically set up the payment plan generally online. So if you are in a situation where you say, I can't pay the taxes, you're going to file the tax return, but you don't want to deal with a finance person and setting up a loan or something like that, possibly, you could basically do it online, setting up your payment plan through the website and so forth. So there's a fairly straightforward process oftentimes, or in general. So there are some groups who still have time to file. Special deadline exceptions may apply to certain military service members and eligible support personnel in combat zones. So if you're a military member and you're actually in a combat zone, the IRS is gracious enough to extend your taxes for a little bit, at least until you get back, which is good. So thank you for your service if you're there. And then several resources are available for service members and their families who may be eligible for these exceptions. There's links to those items here. People who have a valid extension and are in or affected by a federally declared disaster may be allowed more time to file. There's a link to that here as well. So generally, the extension deadline is back to the normal extension deadline. They made some extensions in terms of the original filing deadline, but now the extension is what it normally is. So we should be basically back to the standard at this time, October 15th, unless you're in one of these specialized kind of areas. More information can be found at the links below with the interactive tax assistance and IRS tax withholding estimator. There's links to those items here, and there'll be a link to this in the description.